Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, February 12th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you with another team preview edition of the podcast. We're going to move through most of the NL West today. We quickly discarded the Rockies last week, so they are out of the way. We're going to focus on the meat in the NL West sandwich, the three teams that will likely be in the middle. That, of course, would include the defending National League champion Diamondbacks, the Giants, and the Padres. So three fun teams to look at. I think you can make of them what you wish, really. You could talk yourself into these teams being playoff teams. You could talk yourself into 10 games below 500, and I think you could have a pretty fun conversation either way.
Yeah. This is the lottery. This is what is the dice roll section of the division. I do have more confidence in one of these teams than the other two, though.
Well, let's start with the defending.
Let's start with them, man.
Is it the Arizona Diamondbacks? We'll play Guess Who. Is that the team you feel better about? Projections like them better.
Yeah. I mean,
they're clearly projected for number 2 in the NL West.
Right. And are they? Oh, in the NL West.
Dakota.
Yeah. Sure. I thought you said NL for a second.
No.
Yeah. No. I mean, you come off the recency bias of like them being in the World Series, and you might think that they're a better team than they actually are. So I think they're a pretty good team. I don't think that I would say that they're a favorite to get back to the World Series.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Offseason edition so far, really one particularly big one with Eugenio Suarez, just given how much they struggled to get production from their rotation at third base last season. So that's a pretty big boost for them just from that perspective. They retained Lourdes Gurriel Jr., so they didn't have to go out and find a replacement for him. It's a similar group of hitters to what we saw last year, but there's a couple things that I like that could actually change big time. And the biggest one is Jordan Lawler, right? Jordan Lawler could give them an upgrade over Geraldo Perdomo, who ended up having a better year than most people would have expected last year, but still, by way of weak contact, just looks like a utility player to me. He looks like someone you'd move around for his glove, put him in the bottom third of the order, just let whatever happens. No problem with that kind of profile in that sort of role. He doesn't look like an everyday shortstop in today's game. And Jordan Lawler does have those attributes. So when you see projections for Lawler, we've got the Bat X up on the screen right now over on YouTube. You see power, you see speed. You only see 353 plate appearances, but there's a chance that Lawler wins this job very soon. And once he takes that job, he should be the primary shortstop for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, he had a shoulder injury that seems almost like it's catching in the Arizona minor leagues. He hurt himself swinging on his shoulder just the same way Corbin Carroll and top pick Drew Jones, the son of Andrew Jones, have hurt themselves in similar manners. So I don't know what is going on with that. But it'd be really fascinating to find out that like they were all doing weighted bats or something, but I haven't heard anything like that. And Corbin Carroll himself told me he did not do weighted bats, very specifically. So let's not start a rumor that weighted bats cause shoulder injuries. But one thing that I've seen from Lawler is that post shoulder injury, the power has been a little bit suspect. And I just don't know. I don't know enough like doctor wise to declare him fully fit. I don't. And from like sort of a scouting the stat line, scouting the stat line. I don't see great hard hit rates in the majors or in AAA. And yeah, the sample is only 114 plate appearances, but he hasn't hit a ball over 108.6, and he hit the ball hard over 95 miles an hour less than a third of the time in those 114 plate appearances combined. So it wasn't a great 2023 in terms of batted ball oomph, but everything else looks pretty good.
Yeah. We saw improving plate skills over the course of his time at AA, and what he did at that level last year came with a really slow start. I mean, he wasn't healthy at the beginning of the season. That seemed to slow him down quite a bit. Jordan Lawler, I would say, also because he's so young, the batted ball quality, the contact quality could still improve. The door is definitely open for something like that. but a familiar cast of characters up and down the lineup. Corbin Carroll is the star here. It's power, it's speed. I saw in the baseball forecaster, I think Acuna Light was the suggestion, because even if you don't see another level of power coming from Corbin Carroll, he's one of the most fun players in the league to watch run the bases. It's not even just stolen bases. It's just lightning speed all the time. And last season, Corbin Carroll was 54 for 59 on the base paths. So even if the power doesn't pick up another level, that is a ridiculous combination to have with 20 home run pop, the ability to hit the ball to all fields, a sub 20% K rate. And we're talking about a guy who just turned 23 back in August.
Yeah, where Lawler kind of floats around 50% ground balls, Corbin Carroll does not have that problem. He can lift the ball. He has a nice, sweet line drive approach. Really cut his strikeout rate in the second attempt of the league. And with that whiff rate seems to be sustainable with this above average contact rate, above average walk rate, elite speed. And I think maybe a little bit of developing power. I mean, he hit the ball 113.8 last year. That suggests there's a little bit of raw power in there past maybe 25 homers. So I could see a peak season where he hits 30. I think he settles in at sort of 20 to 25 most seasons. It's hard to tell when that peak season is going to come, though. He's 23. He's seen the league. He might have one more adjustment in him, this coming year, and set the world on fire and get an MVP. I mean, that's how good he is.
Yeah, and I think the quality of the contact for Corbin Carroll coming off of his 2022 debut is something we talked about on this show. I just brought it up as more of a question as opposed to something that would bury him from becoming an early round player. When we saw him debut, his max was a 107.5. The barrel rate was only 5.5%. The hard hit was 32.9%. Not the numbers we're looking for, right? Like it's just proof that the small sample especially can be a little bit misleading.
Yeah, it's instructive for our Jordan Lawler conversation for sure.
Yeah, so Lawler,
it's very similar to what Lawler did last year, this past season.
Yeah, you look at where Lawler goes in redraft leagues right now, typically outside the top 300 overall. With a big spring, he could certainly move up. We talked about shortstop on our position preview, really kind of tapering off somewhere around that pick 200 range. You kind of draw the line with a Zach Neto or a Carlos Correa usually in your leagues. Lawler's after those guys. As long as he has a job, he could sort of move up and possibly join the back of that range.
Yeah, I tend to want to buy plate appearances that deep in a draft. And so that's why I haven't made that jump. But if you're in like a 12-team dynasty league and Lawler seems like he's someone you could buy, if you're in a keeper league where there's an opportunity to buy, like I might do that.
I think we talked about it as a news item recently. Bless you.
Excuse me.
Jock Petersen joining the Diamondbacks lineup as a regular DH. Big side platoon DH is the clear role at this point, barring something unforeseen, some kind of renaissance defensively. Not a big deal because the Diamondbacks have a few quality defensive options they can play out there. They don't need to just force the issue. We saw Alek Thomas start to play a lot better in the postseason last year. Gabriel Moreno looks like someone that could still take a step forward at the plate. So they've got a few young guys that could get better in this core group of position players. They've got the possible star in Lawler on the way. They have the young star already on the roster in Carroll, and they've got a few veterans like Suarez and Christian Walker and Ketel Marte. Really, it's just about health with those guys for the most part. I mean, I think Suarez of the three, it's reflected in his draft day price. He's the most risky because the swing and miss continues to build up in his profile. But you look at Marte and Walker as two guys that should hit right up close to those projections based on the consistency we've seen from them on a per game basis.
Yeah, and the team from a team building standpoint, I really like what they've done because if you look at strikeout rate last year, Arizona had the fourth best strikeout rate as a team. If you look at defense, they were a top 10 team by defense. So then you look at isolated power, and there they were 19th. So what do you do with a team that defends well, has young players all over, makes a lot of contact, and needs power? You add Eugenio Suarez and Jock Petersen. I mean, it seems like a pretty awesome way to go about business, especially since those types of players are cheaper on the market. And so they come from a better place than, say, remember when the Marlins were like, we want to make more contact. Well, they went and got Arias, but they still struck out a lot, because it's a whole team you're talking about. So in this case, the Arizona had a really good foundation team wise, and they could just add a couple players that strike out too much, but hit dongs.
And mostly they don't hurt you defensively, especially with Jock being a DH, right? If your strength was defense and you had to play Jock Petersen in the outfield, that'd be pretty different. Interesting, too, the Diamondbacks, for all the things that went right last year, third from the bottom league-wide in barrel rate, 6.2% barrel rate. So falls right in line with that ISO stat you threw out there where they just need to get to more power more consistently with this lineup. And I think they made the right adjustments over the course of the offseason. Let's shift the focus over to the pitching. A key addition, of course, with Eduardo Rodriguez going there in free agency. Projections are not real kind. The PPERA projection has Erod up at a 4.72 ERA. So definitely some concerns there that maybe what we saw in Detroit is not necessarily what we're going to get throughout this time in Arizona from him. But you got Gallen at the top of the rotation. He looks like at least a high-quality frontline guy. Merrill Kelly, with all the pitches, all the adjustments he's been making, performed really well. We've talked about Brandon Pfaadt a lot on this show. The top four is good, right? It's not great, but it's good. And I think the key is going to be getting a little bit more of the second half version of Pfaadt over an entire season. If they're going to kind of hold their position, remain a playoff threat all season long, I think part of that story is Brandon Pfaadt pitching very well.
Yeah, I think it's completely possible that my model misses on a few of these pitchers. From the perspective of what does Zach Gallen have and what does he need to pitch well? He's got a wide arsenal. He's got command. He's got stuff. He's got demonstrated results. He's been one of the top 10 pitchers in the league the last 2 years in a row. I'm a little surprised that the model, spit out this 3.90 ERA for Zach Gallen. And I don't really know why. But I do know why it doesn't love Merrill Kelly and Eduardo Rodriguez as much, because they don't have as good enough stuff. But it's possible that pitchers with a ton of different pitches and with changeups outperform the model a little bit just because of interactive effects where they have more different options, more different things they can tunnel, more different ways that they can keep the batter on their, guessing basically when it comes to their arsenal, what's going to come. And Brandon Pfaadt, for what it's worth, does have a fair amount of breakout potential because he comes from a place where he had stuff, but was struggling to put it together started throwing a sinker in the postseason. And I think that now gives him that interactive effect where now he can be a sinker slider guy. He can be a four-seam change guy. He's got a couple different looks he can throw at you. I still worry about him versus lefties, but he showed that he can be dominant against righties and survive against lefties. And there are plenty of pitchers in the big leagues who do that.
So plenty to like and a clear path to be that number 4 starter, because the questions right now for this group are kind of around the number 5 spot. Ryan Nelson, who we really liked going into last season, just didn't put it all together. He might be the favorite. Tommy Henry, Slade Ciccone, other options in tow. I'm curious, why didn't it work for Ryan Nelson? This is a guy that was a reliever during his time in college, got pretty good results moving through the Diamondback system as a starter, looked pretty good at the end of 2022 in a limited run as well. And what kinds of adjustments do you think he could make if he is going to secure that number 5 starter spot and have a little more success in 2024?
Well, one thing that happened was totally out of his control was that we updated our model, and it wasn't it didn't go so well for him. But on top of that is just there's some movement changes as well, and his four-seam fastball had 2 inches less ride this past season than it did the season before, and it also his other pitches had less drop. So in general, his pitches did lose some stuff and some spin between 2022 and 2023. So there's that. But then there's also the model reboot, which suggests that the four-seam fastball is below average. The curveball is below average. The changeup is pretty bad. But you could just call it a below average, I guess. The cutter is around average, and the slider is his best pitch, but he throws it less often than the cutter and the changeup. So there could be a way forward for him where he just throws a slider more and more. That's an opportunity for him. The cutter and change are close enough to average that I think that he can do something with them. Maybe he just turfs the curveball completely and changes, just optimizes his existing mix. It's nice that he has those pitches, but he's so forcing fastball dependent. He throws it so much that's my main thing that I just keep shouting on the screen when I see him is I don't think that forcing fastball is good enough. He's not like a Taj Bradley or a Bryce Miller where he can just keep throwing that forcing fastball over and over again and expect to get good results. So I think he needs to figure out a way to trust these other pitches. If you're watching him in spring, watch his pitch mix. Yeah, I just also don't think that the other guys are that good. So I don't think he's got much competition.
Yeah, it's one of those strange things. As good as this system is, they've graduated a lot of the pitchers they have, and it doesn't look like there's really a lot of help coming internally from the group of pitching prospects they currently have in the organization. So maybe it's a very late spring training signing. Maybe there's something else in the works. That's going to be kind of something to watch as far as job battles go over the course of spring training, though I would say you're right. Nelson probably is the favorite at this point. Quickly looking at the relievers, the acquisition of Paul Sewald at the trade deadline last year was huge because they have him this year as well. This was a clear area that needed to be upgraded. Mike Hazen and company did that. If we talked about Sewald in the closer preview, it seems like he's kind of clearly in that second tier of closers, but one that we generally trust to hold onto this job throughout the season.
Yeah, the only thing that worried me was something that you saw maybe in the postseason, which was just that the more often that people see him in a short series, it seemed like the better they got at seeing him. And I just wonder if there's certain types of movement or funkiness or deception that, are subject to this. And then how does that work out over a full season? Because he did just get traded out of a division he was in to a new division. So, maybe the Dodgers haven't seen them that much. And so maybe it'll work for a season or two. But, is there a chance that the first time he sees the Dodgers in April, it's fine. And then when he sees them again, it's not as good. And then when he sees them in September, it's disastrous. Those aren't questions I have answers to. But it is something that occurred to me when I watched Sewald in a short series after they got to see him a few times. They seemed to really kind of lock in on him.
I do like their depth a little more now than I did at the beginning of last season. We saw Andrew Saalfrank come up late in the year. He had some pretty meaningful innings for them in the postseason. He looks like a nice piece for them. Ginkel's still there. Ryan Thompson, they got from the Rays midseason. He was a good addition too. So between those guys, Miguel Castro, it's probably at least an average bullpen going into the season with maybe a slightly above average A group when they have a lead that they're trying to protect. So they've done some pretty good things here.
Ginkel as the guy who could take over if Sewald struggles. He had a really good season last year. In fact, the last two seasons he's been really strong. Lost a little bit of elo last year, so you kind of want to see where he's sitting. But if he's sitting 96 again, I think he could take that job if Sewald stumbles.
So as we've done throughout this series, we'll continue to do. We keep looking at the PECOTA win-loss projections for every team over at Baseball Prospectus. 86.2 wins is the win total for the Diamondbacks using the Goldilocks porridge scale, too hot, too cold, or just right.
Let's see. The Diamondbacks are right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14th in total projected WAR. And you're saying 86 wins. That seems just about right. Although I guess 15th would be technically supposedly 81, but it's just not how it works.
No, they are not distributed evenly.
They're not distributed evenly. There's some teams that are much worse that they're going to feed off of, like the Rockies, like we mentioned. So I think 86 is just about right. Well, how does a team blow past that? I think it's just Alek Thomas and Jordan Lawler, kind of stepping forward. Those are, two of their weaker places offensively. Brandon Pfaadt. So I think it's a little bit on their young players. Yeah, I would say Alek Thomas, Jordan Lawler, and Brandon Pfaadt are the keys to this team. They put together a bunch of veterans around them that are going to probably just do what you expect them to do. Maybe Moreno can take another step forward, but I think that's already, he's good. He's really good. I don't need to put expectations on him as a catcher. It's tough enough.
I think ceiling projections for him as a hitter are still above what he's done so far, but he's already done enough where this is fine. If this is who he is, that's not a problem for the D-backs.
This is Moreno.
Yeah, it's a bonus if Moreno does more than what he's done so far, and he's capable of it, but they don't necessarily need it to come from him.
He used to lift the ball a little bit more in the lower minors. He's now been a ground ball hitter in the majors so far, but that doesn't mean that's his true talent. So if he can lift the ball a little bit more, 109.7 max DB suggests that he could be a 15, 18 homer hitter. That's beyond what is projected to be, but that would be a breakout for Moreno, is 280, 18 homers, 5 to 10 steals. And that's pretty good for a catcher.
And even just compared to his small sample from Toronto in 2022, we saw fewer swings at pitches outside the zone. We saw a little more hard contact from Moreno. He took over that job and looks like he's the catcher for the long-term future now in Arizona. Let's move on to the Padres. I put the Padres ahead of the Giants because in my mind, they're still better. I don't know if that's actually true. It's just something I think is true. So we'll talk through it. We'll see how this goes. Not surprisingly at all, Jurickson Profar actually just re-signed with the Padres. So if we were wondering who was going to play a lot in left field, there's your inexpensive solution to go out there and maybe get 450 plate appearances and take some of the pressure off a few of the younger guys that we've talked about. But it's a weird year for the Padres, having traded Juan Soto, and you feel like the window slammed shut as far as them being a team that was going to spend aggressively and have this sort of different approach under the late owner, Peter Seidler. We'll see how much things change, how quickly things change beyond the Soto deal. It's becoming a little more of a top-heavy sort of lineup. I think that's the main takeaway for me. And Fernando Tatis Jr., I thought showed us a lot. We talked about him a little bit on the outfield preview. His first year back after suspension and a long layoff due to injury. There could still be some rust in there. I think there's some questions as to whether or not he's going to sustain the improved strikeout rate if he brings the power back. Whichever version of Tatis you get, there's power, there's speed, there's now good defense in the outfield. You still have Tatis. You still have Machado, who seems to be recovering well from that arm surgery. You still have Ha-Seong Kim. He didn't get traded. And I know you're down on Xander Bogaerts, but if he's your fourth best position player, you're not in bad shape as a lineup. So I think this is a position player group that probably is getting dinged a little more than it should simply because of the Soto trade.
I think for what it's worth, they kind of went from being maybe top heavy everywhere on the team to trading some of that top heaviness in Juan Soto for depth on the pitching side. I mean, that's obviously what they did in getting Michael King, Johnny Brito, and Randy Vasquez. We'll talk about them later. But what it did do on the hitting side was make them more top heavy. So I was surprised to see, though, because I thought I'm going to take the Bat X projections and sum up all the outfields, and I'm going to find the Padres at the bottom. And that's not what I found. According to the Bat X, the Padres outfield is exactly average. That's not what I see with my eyes when I look at it. I don't think Jose Azocar is a starting outfielder. I don't think Jurickson Profar is a starting outfielder in this league. Jurickson Profar last season had one of the 20 worst seasons since free agency began. It was as bad as 2011 Miguel Olivo, if anybody remembers those days. I do.
I do remember those days.
Yeah. So, there's a Yuneski Betancourt year in there. The Chris Davis year where it all fell apart is in there. Nafi Perez season is in there. So he's not in a good place coming off of last season. I'm not sure he's a starting level outfielder. Could he be a fourth outfielder? Sure. Could Azocar be a fourth outfielder? Sure. That's 2 fourth outfielders and a star. And so it puts a lot of pressure on, I think, Jacob Marcy and maybe Graham Pauley for one of those guys to step forward. Maybe the opening day outfield is Azokar, Profar, and Tatis. I don't know how long that'll stick around. I mean, if Mike Schilt has any sort of power, I don't know that would stick around a long time. I think he would get tired of that pretty quickly and start asking for the young guys.
It's only not a bad depth chart because of Tatis. Like, you have a star that just erases the flaws in this case.
Yeah, I think that's probably why he got up to 15. I mean, it was like 7.5 WARs, like, 4.5 of it is Tatis's. So
easily, yeah. So I guess it comes back to: do you think they have any internal options between Marcy and Graham Pauley and other guys they could shift around? We know there's Jackson Merrill, their top prospect at shortstop. He may end up taking some reps in the outfield this spring. Maybe he becomes an option out there. How do you see them solving it? Like, are they actually done, or is there still one more cheap veteran addition here, even though the Profar one, I guess you could have seen that coming from miles away?
I mean, I thought Adam Duvall would make sense. If they're not going to, I think that if they're not going to play Tatis in center, they do cut themselves off, because there are the kind of Eddie Rosario, Tommy Phams that they could add to this, but they can't play center. I don't think Azokar's a good enough center fielder defensively or bat offensively to take that job. So center field is kind of the open one, in which case I would think Jacob Marcy, because there's been some rumors that Jackson Merrill is going to play left field. But left field is a lot easier place to just stick a bat. And it would just be a real shame, because Jackson Merrill's a great shortstop. Bogarts to left field would make a lot of sense, but it might anger one of your 4 best position players. And I mean, it would. I think it would definitely anger him. So your choice is to sort of rattle the bee's nest, or hope Jacob Marcy steps forward in the spring and just takes center field. That's a possibility. Or why not Tatis in center? And then you can say Marcy and Pauley and maybe even Eddie Rosario or Tommy Pham can be in the corners. That makes a lot of sense to me, but it just hasn't been done so far. I don't know what it is. I guess Tatis sometimes slips mentally in the, defensively. Maybe they just overrate that with their eyes and just think he can't be a center fielder. But I think he would do well with more chances. He's the kind of guy who wants to be engaged in the game. He's a star. He's a superstar. I would say put Tatis in center and keep him engaged. He's got all the tools to do it.
I don't know why you wouldn't at least try it, just given the scope of the need right now, given his age, given that I think he clearly has the tools to at least make it a rational thing to attempt. If you're worried about him getting hurt, okay, I guess I understand that.
I think there's a lot of evidence that he could hurt more.
There's still a wall.
There's walls for everybody.
Corner. Yeah. Well, they all have walls. So
in fact, the
more walls
guys
in the corners.
Have double the walls. Yeah.
Yes. There are more surfaces that can hurt you playing a corner than there are playing center field. Fact.
Yeah.
As far as Tatis goes at the plate, you were looking at this before the show. I thought this was pretty interesting. The location of Tatis's barreled balls in 2021 versus 2023 is a little bit different. He wasn't pulling the ball when he hit the barrels as often in 2023.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see it first in these spray charts, but if you think about it relatively, because there's just more barrels on the left. So you say, oh, it looks like he has just as many barrels, oppo barrels. But if you think about it, there's just more barrels on the left, fewer barrels on the right, and more of those barrels are to center and to right than before. So there is something missing with Tatis a little bit, but I hesitate to say that it's bat speed. Because he still hit the ball 113.4, and he still had a hard hit rate of nearly 50%. So, was bat speed missing? And if it was bat speed, do we think that's something that may have just had to do with the shoulder and wrist injuries that maybe another year out he can get? We're not talking about him losing 5 miles an hour bat speed. I'm guessing he wouldn't even have this barrel rate and have these outcomes if he'd lost 5 miles an hour of bat speed. So if he lost a half a mile an hour or a mile an hour, could he get that back, a year later after the surgery, after sort of, a regular off season where he's not coming back from 2 surgeries? I think yes. And I think this is a subtle change that does not worry me so much. So I'm fully in on Tatis. I think he's going to get back to that at least 250 ISO level. And that's where most of the projections are. But the Bat X, finally, when it came out recently, kind of put together what I'm saying, which is I think he can hit 285 with a 263 ISO, 36 homers. Like this is who I think Tatis can be. And yeah, I'm sure if you stick the Bat X into the projection system, into the auction calculator, as I am doing as I talk, that Tatis comes out pretty nice, 5th best batter in the league. And so I think he's a pretty interesting guy. At the top of, you don't get a lot of value plays at the top of a fantasy draft in the first 5-6 picks, but Tatis might be one of them.
I mean, still theoretically shows the tools that could make him the best player on the board. Like it could happen. It's not, there's 3 or 4 guys that consistently go ahead of him who seem more likely to do it, but he at least still has that. You can't say that about everybody. Even in the first round, you can't say that about everybody.
I'm solidified in the first round. Like, if I suppose there could be different settings and different systems and different things that could make me wrong about this, but it seems pretty universal to me that I'm going very solidly, and I don't care saying this. If you're in a draft with me, I guess you'll know Acuna, Julio, and I guess it is a little bit closer with Carroll and Tatis, but I'm going to go Carroll, Tatis. But
you get Tatis up in that big 5. Okay.
Yeah, that's how much I like him. And with his ADP right now being more like 7 or 8, that's what I'm saying. There's a value play. Of course, Strider being, we had that whole discussion, Strider being the clearly number 1 pitcher, starts nibbling away at like the 4th and 5th batter. I get it. And then also Corbin Carroll's shoulder, and then Tatis's issues that, that's where you start to have some nits you can pick. But I'm pretty solidified in that top 4.
Right. Yeah. Tatis's shoulder, wrist, motorcycle accidents, PED suspensions.
I heard someone say recently they have a no knucklehead rule, and I'm wondering. I think Tatis might be on the knucklehead list.
That seems like it might have been inspired by Ian Kahn, the name at least, the no knucklehead list. That was always a catch-all that Ian had. Let's talk about the pitching for the Padres. It's looking good. We learned about a week or so ago that both just Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish are going through completely normal winters. Now that spring training has started for the Padres, they're on the same schedule as everybody else. ADPs are going to go up for both of those guys. They're not going to be relative bargains quite the same way they have been because everything's going really well. We talked about Michael King at the time the Padres acquired him from the Yankees as sort of the centerpiece of that deal that sent Juan Soto away. It's just going to come down to innings and how effective he is over the course of the season, right? Like I could see King being really good for the first 2 or 3 months and maybe fatigue catching up to him a little bit. He's been a starter before. It's just been a long time. The Yankees have had a need for starters. King hadn't really been the guy they turned to in some of those spots. So I'm not sure I'm as in love with Michael King as the trendy breakout pitcher to target in that range as everybody else is. I like him. I understand why people like him. I just think there's a little more risk cooked in there because I like pitching risk. I actually embrace pitching
you're the
risk.
glass now guy.
I'm the glass now guy. I think this is one of those cases where I'm like, hey, it's cheap. Like it's cheap compared to glass now, but are you buying skills that you really trust from a quality starter, or are you buying it from someone that did it for a little while? I think that's something that you also have to reckon with aside from the injury questions. Like, is this really going to work as well as it did in the second half of last season over a full season as a starter? I trust him a heck of a lot more in San Diego pitching in Petco than I did if he had to deal with Yankee Stadium for half the starts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I trust Ruben Niebla as a pitching coach. I trust the Padres park. I'd actually trust the Arsenal because it's a dominant sinker slider with a good four-seam changeup. So it's a pretty wide arsenal. It's not someone that it's not like a Christian Javier type who was just four-seam slider and was so good that they moved him into the rotation. I think this is more of a regular starter's arsenal. and he commands most of it. And even though the four seam and change are, secondary pitches for him, he got really good results on them. And yes, they may suffer if he has to throw them more, but I think he proved that he can do it. I think that the real big thing for the Padres is if they get more than 500 innings from Musgrove, King, and Darvish, they're going to be they're going to be better than their projections. They're going to be a really good team.
Mm-hmm.
If they get more like 350, which is also a possibility, then they're going to have 150. Even with the depth that they acquired, they're going to have 150 innings they have to fill with people that I'd rather not fill it with. And the back of that Padres rotation did improve a lot along with that trade for King, because I like Vasquez and Brito. I do have them in the top 5. I do not really like Pedro Avila or Matt Waldron that much. And Pedro Avila has minus command of most of his pitches, and stuff wise really only has like one pitch, the changeup, that is that stands out. And if you look at stuff like strikeouts minus walks, it wasn't good. So, if you have 150 more innings from Avila and Waldron, I think that's going to be bad for the team. But I do like Vasquez and Brito to some extent. Vasquez this is who are we looking at right now? This is Pedro Avila. Yeah, we're looking at Pedro Avila's mix. 78 stuff plus on the curveball, 84 on the sinker, 73 on the fastball. It's not good. The changeup is decent, 105 stuff plus. But then you look at the location plus area, and the curveball is the only one he locates well, and he doesn't locate the other 3 well at all. I just don't see a plan of attack where you say he needs a strike, he's going to get the curveball over 3-0.
Mm-hmm.
And then even if that is the case, then people will start sitting curveball 3-0 because he has no other pitch he can command. So if you have like one pitch you can command and one pitch for stuff, and they aren't the same pitch, I think you're kind of SOL. So this pitch chart that we're looking at for Pedro Avila is not is a reason why I'm out on him. If you look at Vasquez and Brito, what you see is a much more wider arsenals. They have more pitches, more useful pitches. Johnny Brito's sinker and sinker and breaking ball are probably better than Vasquez's best pitches, but Vasquez's worst pitches are better than Brito's. So if you just want kind of 4 average pitches in a good park ahead of him on the depth chart, that's Randy Vasquez. If you want like a little bit more, he could maybe get more whiffs and break out and be a little bit better going forward, that's Johnny Brito. I think that they're both going to get 100 innings at least. They need right now. I mean, there are some rumors that the Padres might sign another pitcher. Even if the Padres sign another pitcher, their 6th starter is going to get 100 innings. So,
well, and I think even though we have clean bills of health on Musgrove and Darvish, and you and I both like both of those guys, like there's elevated risk on both of them plus King. Someone will miss some time out of that trio, almost certainly. Even if they get to 500 innings, someone could be hurt for a little while.
Right, 600 is full, right?
As it stands right now, yeah, I think you'd project Vasquez and Brito to have the 4th and 5th spot, and Avila would be on the outside looking in. Matt Waldron, you'll see on the depth chart. I don't see a lot that I like there. They brought back Luis Patino this offseason, so who knows?
Like a reclamation project. And
yeah,
he might end up in the bullpen too.
There's nothing guaranteed to him just as far as an opportunity to start goes. So there's a lot of questions in the depth. I think Brito makes a lot of sense to me because you look at the way he struggled mostly against lefties last year. Homers were the problem. It's not a surprise at all.
Sinker slider guy struggling against lefties. I mean, that's what you want for Brito is a cutter or a change or some sort of, some sort of step forward against lefties for sure.
Yeah, 9 of the 14 homers he allowed last season came at Yankee Stadium. He threw about 18 more innings on the road too. So big difference in the home road splits. ERA was like 2.5 runs lower, a little more than that even for Brito outside of Yankee Stadium, a 3.17. I don't think he's a 3.17 true talent pitcher. I just think he's a guy that was going to get punished more than most in Yankee Stadium with the pitches he has, with the flaws he has. A lot of that can be erased by the park. So 2 pretty interesting depth guys who go super, super late for fantasy purposes. They're
in my they're both making an appearance in my deep sleepers article, so you can get those anytime you want. And honestly, I don't think they're great fits for 10-12 last pitcher because I don't
they're
see that kind of upside
for those leagues.
But they're pretty good draft and hold picks, if you ask me.
Yep.
Like they're going to play all year. How many times are you going to be like, ooh, I got Brito in San Diego against the Giants? Like maybe I'll circle that one. Another thing that I just wanted to mention was that I heard from a team analyst of somebody that was in Brito's old division that they had Brito's sinker as one of the best run suppression sinkers in baseball. So
pretty interesting too.
Again, not real useful against lefties. So you want to hear something about one of his pitches that's not the sinker or the breaking ball in the spring. I think they call it a curveball. So if you hear something about something other than sinker or curve taking a step forward from Johnny Brito, he could actually surpass Randy Vasquez.
We're not that far away from our closer preview that we just did, but since we record that, the Padres have said they're not going to name a closer, at least not yet, which is a little weird. Robert Suarez is still my favorite for the job. Yuki Matsui,
it's because of those guys.
I think it's because of those guys.
They maybe even because there was like a little bit of a sort of a nink and a nod to the young guys. To the guys coming over from NPB in Korea to be like, you'll be in the mix for closer.
Yeah, maybe
fine with us.
Maybe that's what it is. My assessment of the situation continues to be if Robert Suarez is healthy, he will be the primary source of saves. Maybe it's a slight share. If they had 40 saves as a team, I would expect at least 25 and probably 30 to go to Suarez as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, Matsui's fastball looked really good in the WBC by Stuff Plus, but none of his other pitches did, but he didn't throw that many. So I'm interested to see what his secondary pitches are like. I suppose Yuki Matsui could take that, especially if Suarez is I would watch Suarez's velo. That's a good way to know how healthy he is. Mm-hmm. And I think Wusuko had some real command issues, so I think he's going to be more of a setup guy.
Yeah, I think he's like 6th and 7th inning more than late innings for the Padres this year. Just a gut feeling based on some things we've seen from him.
They still have Steven Wilson, who's really solid. They have some options.
They do. A couple prospects that could be on the way. Drew Thorpe came over in the Juan Soto trade. We could see him before the end of the season if there's problems with injuries or if some combo of Brito or Vasquez or other guys that are relying on the back don't come through. Dylan Lesko could be a fast mover through the system, maybe for a late season sort of promotion.
Snelling.
Robbie Snelling's the guy that I think you really want to keep an eye on. Another guy that's moved very fast, got time at AA last year, actually made 4 starts there and looked pretty good. Had a little bit of a walk problem during his brief time there, but geez, a 1.56 ERA as a teenager pitching at AA. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think he was my league pitcher of the year. The Fangraphs grades are a roller coaster a little bit. 45-50 fastball, that's not great. 45-50 slider, changeup 30-45. Wait, why is this guy good? And then command 20 present, 50 future. Like 20 is the worst. The scouting scale goes 20 to 80. So they're saying that he has terrible command that might become average. I mean, his walk rates don't look like that. He had a 6.5% walk rate in A ball, a 7.6 in high A. 13.7 in AA is not great, but that was 17 and a third innings. So like there's a little bit of a disconnect here between like, oh man, they don't like his stuff and they really hate his command. And wait, he struck out like 28% of the batters he saw and walked like 9% of them. Like seems like a strange combination of scouting grades and results. So I want to see more of him. I have not laid eyes on him in person yet. Just seen some stuff on video, and I think that they've got him probably internally circled as this could be our wild card for the late season.
Definitely seems like they're higher on him than some of the analysts have been up to this point, given how aggressively they have promoted him. Padres, according to Pacoda, 79.3 wins. Too hot, too cold, or just right?
I'm going to give him the incomplete.
Oh, come on. I'm going too hot. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going too cold.
No, the reason I'm giving him incomplete is like I think they could be better than 79 wins with just a little bit of work. And if there's a big discussion about like how much money they have to spend. And one of the things that they were told was they had to keep it under, under 200 million or so, under the first luxury tax apron. I think there's, in fact, when they were given the loan, they were told that they couldn't get the 100 million they asked for when they asked for the loan, and they had to take 50 million. And I think there was some sort of debt servicing rules that are in the collective bargaining agreement that are related to why they can't go over the first luxury tax, which is 237. But right now, their luxury tax number is 215. I see a lot of people reporting it as 159, but that does not include a lot of other stuff. They're still spending money on Eric Hosmer. They're still spending money on Matt Carpenter. So there's some other stuff that's added into that 149. It's actually 215 for luxury tax purposes. Do they have $20 million left? Probably not. Do they have $5 million left? Could they make an outsized difference with $5 million? They just got Spencer Turnbull for $2 million in Philadelphia. I think Spencer Turnbull would have been a good signing for them. What would Eddie Rosario cost? What would Adam Duvall cost? I think those won't be a lot in terms of moving that line that you're saying, 79, wins or whatever. But they would mean a lot to me when I look at the depth chart and think about the Padres, just to get one or two more veterans on here, because they have improved their depth and their young guys are knocking on the door. I just want to have Duvall there in case Jacob Marcy's not ready, because I don't like having Azokar there in case Jacob Marcy's not ready. You know what I mean? And so I'm going to give him an incomplete and a too cold. I think it's too cold already, but I think that like one or two signings could knock them into, hey, these guys are ready to compete for a wild card.
Most likely those signings would nudge the win total up, but you think it'd still probably be lighter than it should be, which I think comes back
because
to
you put Duvall and Turnbull on this team, and the over under goes to 80.5, and I'm still thinking like, no, this is more like 83, 84, and get a little lucky, get 86, 88.
Yeah, I think health's going to be a huge part of it for this team in particular.
Manny's health.
Huge for everybody, but they have got a greater dependence on a smaller group of guys that have some known injury issues. Injury risk guy, I think it's too cold. That's just where I like to live.
We finished the Arizona talk with just like, how does this team take a step forward? It's really obvious. Luis Campusano takes a step forward. Jacob Marcy takes a step forward. Maybe Jackson Merrill, makes the big leagues. Maybe Tucu Peter Marcano, maybe somebody that we haven't talked about takes a step forward. Maybe Vasquez or Brito. Like it's the young guys here too. The collection of veterans is not as solid as the D-backs, but it's a similar sort of setup where they've got a collection of veterans and then a bunch of young guys in positions of need. So that's how you write the story of the Padres, making the playoffs next season is, 2 or 3 of these young guys just took a step forward.
Let's try to write a story that puts the Giants back in the playoffs. That's going to be a little bit harder to do. And projections say they're actually a tick better than the Padres. Only about a full, not even quite a full win, according to Pacoda. 80.1 is their number. A little bit of a spoiler there. I think this is a team that, because they had the just ridiculous run back in 2021, just a season where everything went right. They did a lot of things right and then kind of got lucky on top of that. Mm-hmm. It just messed up our perception of where they were at, what their true talent level was. And it's been a couple of years trying to unpack, like, okay, where are they now exactly? I look at this group of hitters and it's pretty funny. Like, even if you don't play fantasy, maybe you can appreciate this. They do not have a hitter in this Giants lineup inside the top 100 overall. So there's no Giants hitter that goes in the first 100 picks of a fantasy draft. It just doesn't happen. And they only have 2 inside the top 3
on average for every other team, right?
It's most teams have maybe a few. Yeah. It's unbelievable. Thairo Estrada is their most valuable position player for fantasy players because he steals bases and doesn't hurt you in average, gets to some power. He's a good player, but that's the hard thing about this team right now is you start to look at this group of hitters, and even if you're bullish on Jung-Ho Lee, okay, like what else is there compared to the other teams we're looking at in this division, especially? And we haven't even looked at the Dodgers yet. What are they doing with this group of position players?
Yeah, we just finished, the last two with like, what goes right, who steps forward, and I'm going to have something on Marco Luciano. That's positive, but I'd rather be negative first because I don't know if it's because I'm here, and I have to see them. Like, I think Patrick Bailey is a wonderful defensive catcher.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I think Casey Schmidt is a wonderful defender. I'm out of nice things to say about young hitters coming up through this organization. Luis Matos came up, and it seemed like a surprise to everybody in the organization that he couldn't play center field well. It almost seemed like a surprise to people that he wasn't fast. And I'm just like, okay, like, listen, me, idiot, who doesn't watch every minor league game, I was surprised that he was slow and couldn't play center field. But y'all, like, run this team. Like, somebody should have noticed that before you stuck him out there. I think that caused them to kind of panic and maybe overpay for Jung Hoo Lee a little bit. I mean, the numbers that they gave Jung Hoo Lee will make sense if he's a 3-4 win player, as the projections say, but also were like $20 to $30 million more than projections suggested Jung Hoo Lee was going to get. Why do you do that? Because you're like, crap, how do you get young up the middle when your young up the middle guys that are coming up can't hit? And so, like, I don't really like Tyler Fitzgerald either. Like, I don't like Casey Schmidt's bat at all. He swings at everything. Patrick Bailey is a switch hitter. He could take a step forward. There's some things I like about him. He could be emerging as kind of like a really solid catcher. Like he's not the same kind of guy as Shea Langoliers, but like, we said nice things about Shea Langoliers. You can say nice things about Patrick Bailey. It doesn't mean he's great for fantasy, but he's a good catcher. They have a good number one catcher. I'm going to say some nice things about Luciano later, but generally, I am a little bit dismayed by the state of player development in San Francisco, given all the resources they have, given the attention they've given it. It doesn't seem like it's working right now.
Right. It makes you wonder if the problem is more in scouting and bringing the right players into the organization, because it seems like at the top end, one of the things they were doing well, even a few years ago, was finding guys in their mid or late 20s and turning them into useful big leaguers, which I think we would agree is a useful
coaching well.
Yeah. You have smart coaching. You're identifying guys that slip through the cracks on the rosters. That's good. If you're not finding good talent through the draft, international free agency, that's a problem. If you can't turn young players into good players, that's a problem. Luis Matos, that is pretty strange, right? I mean, for a guy that got to the big leagues so young, you'd think, if anything, if you on paper, you're like, this guy plays center field, he doesn't strike out a lot, he can steal some bases, he gets the occasional power, he must run well. 60th percentile in sprint speed for a guy that's 21 years old. It's not great, but yes, the organization should be fully aware of that as a shortcoming. So he does look like a corner outfielder. He doesn't hit like a corner outfielder, so that's kind of funky.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if you got some other guys in your roster that exceed expectations relative to their position. Doesn't really matter where the production comes from.
But the rest of your roster is old.
But the rest of your roster is a bunch of guys that are better served mostly mixing and matching and being put in their ideal spots, not guys that you necessarily want to play every day. I mean, you look at this list, who do you like to possibly exceed? Like you could get as many Giants hitters as you want because they're so cheap, but Michael Conforto doesn't look like the same guy post shoulder injury. I thought there was a chance they'd get more out of him last year. Wilmer Flores,
stretches, but he's 30 now, and the batted ball quality is worse than when he had before the shoulder injury.
I mean, like the improvements to JD Davis's defense that we've talked about. I don't know if most people thought any organization could do that. That's a nice win, but
I'll say something nice about him. Listen, that was the first time he did 546 plate appearances. To my eye, he was gassed at the end of the season. Like, could he just be more prepared, more ready for 650 plate appearances? Could he be a guy that they just stick in there? He was 4% better than league average of the stick. What if he starts out well and he's more like 10%? Like for his career, he's 14% better than league average of the stick. What if he plays to his career numbers early on and they just said, you know what, screw it. Like, you're our everyday first baseman or whatever it is, you're our everyday third baseman. Like, and he basically isn't that much better per AB, but like just gets to 650.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that a possibility? The reason I think it's a possibility is that, you know, I don't think Casey Schmidt is a guy whose bat you want to get into the lineup. You know, so yes, you could give Davis a blow, but it'd just be to give him a rest. It's not because you like Casey Schmidt better against righties or something, you know. So I don't see a natural person that I want in the lineup more right now. That's a caveat, is like Matt Chapman's still out there. You know,
yeah, it would help if they were to make a late addition free agency for sure. They are desperate for it at this point.
So Davis, I like a little bit. Lee, like just maybe has a little bit more power than we expect and than the projections expect. Like maybe he hits 12, 15 homers, and you know that would outpace his projections and outpace his price at auction. So those are the two. And then I think Tyler Estrada is just undervalued by people. I don't think he's going to be better than he was, but I think that people just don't appreciate how good he's been.
I think the nice thing I could say about that group of hitters is Patrick Bailey. We know the glove is phenomenal. I think there's reason to believe he's controlled the strike zone well everywhere he's played in the minors. So the K rate could come down or the walk rate could come up. He hit the ball pretty hard last year. 38% hard hit rate's not bad. He doesn't pound the ball into the ground a lot. Because his defense is so good, he will continue to play a lot. He could get better. So I think there could be some growth from him at the plate. But again, these are pretty small bumps over the projection. It's kind of like if someone's going to go just bonkers in this lineup somewhat unexpectedly, and I only say somewhat because he's a top prospect. People have known who Marco Luciano is for years. It's that everything clicks for Luciano and they get huge growth. That would be like the one big pleasant surprise you could maybe project.
And I like him because he's hit the ball hard, 111.8 in the majors last year. And if you combine his majors and minor league hard hit rate, he gets a 51.6% there. So I went looking for players under 25 last year that had a max EV over 111 and a hard hit over 48%. And the people that he's lined up with. And then I also was like, well, he misses a lot. So like I have to put that in. So I put the swing strike rate had to be over 14%. So it's a mixed bag, but it's an interesting mixed bag. Listen to these, the comps for him: Everson Pereira, Mark Vientos, Christopher Morel, Nolan Gorman, Fernando Tatis Jr., MJ Melendez. It's a group where not every one of these guys is going to settle in and be a major league regular. Mark Vientos, the glove is bad, but Luciano does not have that glove problem. And Everson Pereira is an outfielder on a team that is going to give you 100 plate appearances before you're traded or cut or you're back in the minors. You know, like they're not going to give him a long extended look. I don't think that's true for Marco Luciano. I heard it's this a little bit from the old regime, but I heard the plan was just to stick him in at shortstop on day one. And I don't see anybody out on the market that they're going to stick in there over him unless they sign Tim Anderson. That would be a surprise for me because they could have acquired Tim Anderson at the trade deadline for almost nothing. And they, like every other team, decided not to. So I think Luciano's in there from day one. I think his glove keeps him in there. And I'm not saying he's going to be Tatis, but there's a lot of stuff under the hood you can like. And I think that one thing that really happens is, you know, he did not chase, but he also didn't swing in the zone. And in fact, I would tell him, get in there and be aggressive. Make the most out of this ability. If you swing and miss a lot, it's not always great to wait and be patient because then you might get your pitch and swing strike three, you know? I think in his case, almost like a Pablo Sandoval approach might be better. Just get in there and rake, like just swing, get aggressive and pound some homers. I'm not sure that he's going to be a superstar, but given that he's super, super cheap this year, I'm looking to acquire him.
Yeah, and he's coming off a year in which the K rate was close to 30% at AA. It was above 35% during his brief time in AAA. So it just seems like nobody's really into him. There's been some injuries underneath all of these somewhat underwhelming lines. He's been so young for the level. I think most projection systems are going to spit out something pretty ugly. People are going to stay away from Luciano. But if he's got a clear run of playing time, if they believe he's a shortstop, it doesn't matter what other people think of him defensively. If they're going to give him the playing time, he could actually get a lot better really fast. And
my eye scouting says that like the actions are fine. He just throws it away sometimes. I mean, that's something that really sticks out. It's like one of those things that when you see it happen, you're like, oh, he could never be a shortstop. You know what I mean? But Fernando Tatis used to throw it away and then he got better. I mean, and now he's not a shortstop, so maybe not a great example, but
no, but limited range. Unless you're like looking for it or trained to see it, it doesn't jump at you the same way that a throw that goes into the stands. Like everyone notices
Derek Jeter is our prime example of that.
It's the catcher defense. We all see passed balls. Like
that's why people hate Gary Sanchez too much, dude. Yes, he drops some pass balls. It happens like once every 25 games. And then you think, well, we lost the game because of it, and you hate him. But otherwise, he's a good defensive catcher.
Oh, let's get to the pitching for the Giants here. I tried to find, I don't know if anyone picked up on this. Every single pitcher featured today is doing the same thing. They're celebrating a strikeout or an end of an inning. So they're just walking up the mound yelling. It's great because they all overlay perfectly.
Well, because if you did one with them actually pitching, the leg would be over half the stats.
Right. And then the leg would be all like blurry and there's no one cares about that. But
we just cut off a leg in the middle.
Usually there's a missing leg if I'm messing with Photoshop. But Logan Webb, far and away, just the ace of this staff, right? I mean, does it a different way. Doesn't miss as many bats as a lot of other top-end starters, but gets a ton of ground balls. It's legit, right? Has good control, has a nice home park behind him, probably a tick undervalued in fantasy because of the lower K rate. I have no qualms about Webb. I think this is a very, very good pitcher kind of heading up this group. Robbie Ray eventually could be a clear number 2. It's easy to see it. Once he's healthy again, I get that. I understand you have to wait for it to happen. The questions really come back to the rest of this group. And
what they do until Robbie Ray comes back.
Yeah, I mean, that's one extra spot to fill in a rotation where you've always got some questions. They've done things their own way these last couple of seasons, using openers, having 3-4 inning guys. You have to get buy-in on that. We talked about the Jordan Hicks addition back in the starting pitcher preview. You could see it. The stuff numbers are really good. The questions are about command. How is this different? Tell me a story that leads to a different outcome for the Giants pitching staff as a group in 2024.
I suppose you can squint and see a traditional rotation. So it's like one of those things where it's almost like when we talk about the Rangers, right? Like, let's say you just fast forward to August. Let's say they paper over it and they do fine. But then in August, you wake up and you're like, oh, the rotation right now is Webb, Ray, Cobb, Harrison, and maybe even Hicks is back in the bullpen by then. But if that's your front 4, you're like, oh, that's fine. Those people come out there every 5 days and give you 5 innings. We're not playing a bunch of tricks here. But they're going to have to play a bunch of tricks to get there. And that's why I think this team, more than any other team, could use Blake Snell.
Oh, yeah. That's where I put Snell.
At least
originally.
On day 1, he'll be healthy. And if he's hurt later, well, then you can replace him with Alex Cobb or Robbie Ray.
Right. The Grant Brisbee, Mitch Hedberg, frozen banana pitcher approach. Yeah. That's still here. That's still part of the Giants' DNA. That may never go away so long as Farhan is heading up the front office. But even Alex Cobb is coming off of hip surgery. So there's another guy that's
doing it too.
Yeah, you can't just automatically assume he's 100% full go when the season starts. He started a throwing program a few weeks ago, but there's some question there. I think they have to try Jordan Hicks as a regular starter initially, and then they've got each level they can try on the way down if it doesn't work. Oh, it didn't work going 5+ at a time. Okay, let's put an opener in front of him. Let's see if he can get 3-4 innings at a time. Oh, if that doesn't work, then we'll use him as a fireman out of the bullpen.
Maybe, in fact, actually, because of the confidence play, maybe go the opposite way. Start with the biggest baby gloves you can. Start him in his first start. He has an opener and he goes 3 innings, and you say, wow, that was great. And the second time out, you give him 4 innings. You say, hey, listen, you got it. And then 2 or 3 weeks in, he's actually got a full spot. That's how I would do it, I think. Put him in a position to succeed. Make it as easy as possible for him to succeed. The problem with that means Kyle Harrison has to be in every has to be an every down back. Has to be a guy who actually goes deep into games. And Keaton Winn has to pitch deep into games, in fact, for this to work. Because Jordan Hicks is going to require bullpen days. And I think Tristan Beck is going to require bullpen days because he only has a good slider and not much else. So he's really a 3-inning guy. So you can't have 3-inning guys in your rotation, I don't think.
I think Keaton Winn probably gets a shot to be used like a regular starter right away.
Yeah.
If you look back at the workloads from last season, it was 9 total appearances that he made with the big club. All of them except for one were 4 or more innings.
Yep.
He went 5+ 5 times. Like that's regular usage, and he's pretty efficient too. He doesn't run up high pitch counts either. So I would say Winn is probably the unheralded sleeper type. If you want to comp,
he's like on my deep sleeper list. There's a lot of really cool things about him. He throws a split finger 55% of the time. I think that'll come down because the slider. What he told me was that he couldn't throw the slider after Tommy John, so he just threw the splitter after splitter after splitter. The slider looks okay by Stuff Plus, and he's more removed from Tommy John, so I think he's going to bring that slider up, and it's not going to be a good fastball, but he showed that he can hide the fastball with the splitter, and he has good enough command of that splitter, so I think he's going to be a really weird pitcher. I can't think of many people who are like slider, splitter, and their four seam's not that good, but he has the chance. Like, I think when you're looking at the rotation, at least right now, he needs to actually pitch. Like he has to pitch.
I think I would draw the line for now as far as drafting Keaton Winn, 15-team mixed leagues as one of your bench pitchers. I think you could do that. Mm-hmm. I think you could stream him at home in some more shallow leagues. I really think there's a window there to actually do that early in the year because he should go undrafted in more shallow formats unless he just has an amazing spring, in which case people might start to get excited if they make him their last pitcher in a 12-team league or something along those lines. Who's your would you rather? If you were going to take one of Harrison or Hicks, who would you rather have for this season?
I'm not looking at my rankings. I guess Harrison, I think he just has more innings, but if I could like somehow make it like a use case or something like on a per inning basis, I'd take Hicks.
Yeah, 2 for 2 on shares of Hicks in my draft and hold so far. So I don't know if I'm going to have him on every roster, but got a little bit of Jordan Hicks already.
That's a good one in draft and hold because you're like, worst case scenario, I'm buying 60 or 70 good innings.
As a short reliever, I know he'll be good. I think as a multi-inning, bulk guy, I think he might be good. That was one of my defenses of it is he's not that expensive. And in that format, especially 3 or 4 innings with a shot at a win, in a good home park, I'll take my chances. Plenty of Ks likely for Jordan Hicks as well. So for the projection, 80.1 as things sit right now from Pacoda. Too hot, too cold, or just right?
Just right. I mean, it seems like a pretty mediocre team.
Yeah, I'm gonna give them a too hot. I think they're gonna come in a little under. It's only a little bit too hot, relatively speaking. But I don't give out enough too hots. So I can't think everybody's under projected.
I'm just a little bit surprised they're ahead of the Padres because when you look at the Padres, I think it's very obvious that there's two places of need, and it's the outfield and the back end of the starting rotation. But when you look here, I feel like the need, I guess the need is more spread out. Mm-hmm. They've got okay options, and so it's hard to but I would just say the need is like the entire lineup. Other than maybe the first hitter and the second hitter,
It's illuminating to see ADPs where there's 2 in the top 300 among that position player group. That's weird.
Part factors and stuff, but I think the need is the entire lineup and the back end of the rotation, and maybe even some part of the bullpen, be it, depth wise.
Yeah, a big year for this front office, though. I think they need to have some success if they want to keep everything together beyond.
Which is why I expect one of the Boris clients that's still out there to end up in San Francisco. I think it's a little bit desperate times. The Farhan Zaidi, I think, got a 1-year extension. And so that's how good he feels about his job security, I bet.
Yeah, that would be uncomfortable to say the least in a role like that. Well, we are going to go as we sign off. Just a heads up, we got a big show announcement coming tomorrow, so be sure to tune in for that. Always exciting to have something like that we can share. You can find Eno on Twitter at Eno Saris. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. The pod is at Rates and Barrels. And You can get a subscription to The Athletic for $2 a month for the first year at theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. Now, we got lots of folks out there who maybe just started tuning in recently with the Super Bowl having been played on Sunday. Today is the first day of fantasy baseball season for some folks. Welcome. We've been at it for like 3.5 months because we really don't stop, but we're happy to have you here. And we look forward to you catching up. We got a position preview series that already dropped, so be sure to check those out wherever you listen to podcasts or watch those on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already, and drop us a comment on this video. We'll try to pick up some mailbag questions for an upcoming episode here in the near future. So that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
I've got my young breakout pitchers up there. If you subscribe, you get to read that. And as always, thanks for listening.